Hello, everyone. I'd like to welcome everyone to the KiwiTech's online 808 workshop. Today, we're focusing on startup founders who are raising Series A funds or later rounds. For those of you that don't know me, my name is Emma Warden. I'm KiwiTech's Senior Business Analyst coming to you off the East Coast in the US. I'm happy to be here today. I've been taking a little break from events, but I'm happy to be back with you all. And I'd like to thank you all for joining us again today. Warm welcome to all of our presenters who have taken the time to be here and impart their knowledge onto you. For today, I'm going to be serving as the moderator, make sure everything runs smoothly. If you have any questions, feel free to shoot them to me in chat. Again, before I turn things over to our EVP and Chief Startup Officer, Mohsin Syed, I'd like to go over just some ground rules to help you guys. Each of the presentations is going to be 15 minutes. Following that 15-minute period, we're going to have a quick Q&A with a response time of about 1 minute for each question. For the startups and founders who are attending, submit all of those questions to me and to the presenters using the Q&A feature. You'll find that at the bottom menu of your Zoom window. I'll be reading the questions out to our presenters aloud on the event, so you'll get them answered live just here. Also during the event, we're going to shoot some feedback surveys over to you via a link in the chat. Those honestly help us a ton, so please open them, please give us your feedback. It helps us with improving these events as a whole, and also just giving individual feedback for any of our presenters, etc. Additionally, if you have any additional questions on KiwiTech's ecosystem specifically, this is for our startups out there in the audience, feel free to select that option in the feedback form and we'll get in touch with you shortly. Today's mentors, I should go ahead and introduce them, are going to be Jeff Goldsmith, VP of Marketing for Chooch AI, Jeffrey Appelman, the Director of CFO Consulting Partners, LLC, Sarah Bhardwaj, Enterprise Architect here at KiwiTech, and also Pira Formanek, the CEO of Young America Capital. So with that, right before we get there, I'd like to introduce our EVP and Chief Startup Officer, Mohsin Syed. He is the man, the myth, the legend who built this ecosystem from the ground up. So with that, Mohsin, over to you.
All right. Yeah, glad to have you back on public demand. Hey, everyone, to all the entrepreneurs who've dialed in, some of the investors have joined us as well. A warm welcome from KiwiTech. My name is Mohsin Syed. I'm the EVP and Chief Startup Officer at KiwiTech. A lot of us today on the guest list know a lot about KiwiTech, but for those of you who are new to us and new to our ecosystem, I'll just kind of run a couple of minutes of an introduction about KiwiTech, who we are, what we do. We take great pride in being an integrated global community of entrepreneurs, investors, mentors, and corporations. We built this program today and scaled it to about 250 plus portfolio companies, 282 to be precise as of today. And the most wonderful part about building this ecosystem, it's been very much partnership driven, entrepreneur driven, and the whole ecosystem driven. While we take a great part in making sure that all stakeholders in a typical startup ecosystem are provided each and every support system that's out there. I think the biggest part of this ecosystem is working with all the major stakeholders, and that's terrific. And one of our key stakeholders today is our very vested, engaged, 700 plus strong investor network. They represent some of the most entrepreneurial driven angel investors, family offices, VCs. So we get not only great support from them in terms of capital, but also a lot of smart capital through that investor network. We've raised more than $75 million for our portfolio companies over the last few years. And the other organic element in our ecosystem is our mentor network. Most of them are our investors, but we also have some really strong startup mentors. 4 of them that will be on the stage today at different stages. But I think these are some terrific mentors who not only have contributed and scaled businesses all across different industry verticals, but all across also different stages of the startup life. And today our ecosystem is spread across US, Canada, Europe, and certain parts of GCC as well. Next slide. The journey, I think one of the most important driving forces within the KiwiTech ecosystem has been our own founder group journey. When we scaled a startup over a period of 20 years from a 4-member startup to exiting in 2012. I think a lot of that experience, a lot of that learnings, a lot of those pain points have resonated across the whole gamut of things that we do here at KiwiTech. So that was helpful in launching the KiwiTech Startup Program. And I think with year after year, entrepreneur after entrepreneur, I think today we've grown into this very strong family of really high value and high return on investment portfolio companies that we take great pride in. We certainly believe that by 2023, we are on pace to be another unique portfolio, another unique ecosystem of 1,000+ portfolios in our network. So next slide, please. Okay. What really excites a lot of people about our ecosystem is the sheer deal flow. Over the last couple of years, we've reviewed close to 65,000 startups, predominantly most of them from North America, and we've taken them to different due diligence sessions. And most of the due diligence sessions is active engagement with entrepreneurs and their teams, understanding what their roadmap over the next 12 to 18 months look like, and if support systems in our ecosystem could add value to them, add incremental value, add definitive value. And that has culminated in us identifying 165 startups. So if you look at the acceptance rate, it's a pretty incredible acceptance rate into our program, but it's also due to a lot of effort that we put in as a team to make sure that we pick the right people to work with. And we're extremely proud of that 165 startups that we have onboarded over the last couple of years. Events have been the core of this program. Events have been the core of our partnerships. Events have been the core of our growth story. And we kind of moved from in-person events. So last year we did about close to, I would say about 100 events, in-person events across coast to coast in the US, a few events in Europe and in Middle East. But we were quick to move towards taking all our events to an online format. We did that as early as in February. And we have events that cater towards all the different stakeholders in the ecosystem. Our demo days are exclusive for our portfolio companies, so they could pitch to an intimate setting of about 50 to 60 investors in any given demo day. We have workshops, one of which you will be attending today. A VC panel is another an interesting mix where we bring in VCs and startups to connect on a dual opt-in mode. COVID-19 and the challenges that COVID-19 presented also led us to believe and showcase some of the top innovations that are happening across different industry verticals through the Techathons. We have also industry panels. We believe that there are a lot of industries that are still underserved, both in terms of capital, in terms of mentorship, in terms of other resources available. So we like to focus on specific industries. Through our industry panel, we had an industry panel in InsurTech last week. We'll have an industry panel across social impact investments in tech in a couple of weeks from now, and sports tech in sometime in September. Venture Fair, again, it's an event that we just started this quarter. The first of it is coming up on the 26th and 27th of August, where we will have more than 500 VCs and investors and family offices who will attend. There will be startup pitches and panel discussions. I definitely encourage, if you're in the startup ecosystem, you should definitely enroll it for it. We have a family office panel. I think a lot of startups today are cozying up to the fact and the value of what family offices bring to the table. We have been a great recipient of good, solid family offices support over the last few years. So we're actually having a family office panel tomorrow. So if anyone is interested, feel free to reach out to events@kiwitech.com, and they'll be happy to register you. As we add more events, one of the ones that will come up would be the Enterprise Innovation panel event, which we will kick off in next quarter. Now to the next slide, please. All right, so the pillars of our ecosystem are primarily classified into 4 different categories. Technology is our first handshake with our portfolio companies, where we help them on a very unique model, wherein every dollar that they pay us in cash results in another dollar of us providing them in services in exchange for equity. And today we have a very strong team of 500 plus resources, but both in India as well as in the US, supporting our portfolio companies across various stages of product development and business stages. As I mentioned, we've raised more than $75 million worth of capital for our portfolio companies. The mentorship is a very organic evolution of our program. And as we're doing all these three elements, one of the most newest additions to our model is to be able to provide business development, sales, and marketing support to some of our portfolio companies. That's something, a new addition to us, and we're making some really solid progress under that pillar as well. Next slide, please. Thank you. Now, the 808 workshop, this was back last year. This was a perfect trivia question that could win you a wine bottle, but today everything is virtual, so there's very little opportunity to play this trivia. But the whole genesis behind this was we've been able to work with 200 plus startups, building thousands of products for them. And it's been across 1 million plus consulting sessions, right? And we always felt that there was a lot of practical on-hands learning and feedback for us across these different product development efforts that we wanted to give back to the entrepreneurial community in a more organized structure. And everybody knows what a 404 error is for a startup. It's a nightmare. So we basically don't want the 404 to repeat itself a year. So that's the whole genesis behind the Startup 808 series, the Entrepreneur Workshop, where we bring in, next slide, please. Okay, so obviously, as I said, we've got a lot of experience from our brainstorming consulting sessions, from the number of products that we've built for startups. Next slide. That we now have these workshops that we primarily cater towards 4 major categories of your business: product, design, technology, and strategy. And today, what you will be seeing over the next hour and a half will be experts and mentors across some of the most 4 fundamental areas of the business, whether it's fundraising, marketing, using AI as a platform. Jeff Appelman is going to bring in some very interesting experiences of scaling businesses to multiple exits. And also we'll have a topic on blockchain on public demand. So again, I don't want to take any more time between now and the mentors. I really appreciate everyone turning up for this event. I hope you and your families and your teams are doing safe, staying healthy, staying as per local guidelines. And I really wish you a very successful event and a very productive one. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Mohsen. Without further ado, I'm going to throw things over to our mentors to begin the presentation. So first up, I'd like to introduce Jeff Goldsmith, the VP of Marketing at Chooch AI. So go ahead, throw your video on, throw your screen share on. We're excited to meet you. There you are.
Good morning. Thanks for that introduction. It's amazing that KiwiTech has worked with over 280 startups, 65,000 startup reviews in the past year. Was it year or in a lifetime? In any case, that's a remarkable number. So my name is Jeff Goldsmith, and can you see me? Am I sharing my screen? Let's see here. Yeah, nice to hear. Nice to hear your voice, Motion. So this is actually a presentation I developed when I was going to Japan quite often and working with Japanese startups, and that for a couple of years. Prior to my current role, which is head of marketing at a company called Chooch AI. We do visual AI for the enterprise. One thing I'm not going to talk about in this presentation is a thing we're doing at Chooch, which we're working with analysts quite a lot. We've briefed Forrester, 451 Group, Gartner, IDC, and that's helping us get the message out through their reports to enterprise customers. So if that's something your startup needs to do, that's a great channel. And so that's what we're going to talk about really, is organizing your startup marketing program in that way, like looking at different sort of mechanisms to get the word out. And in my view, after all this time of doing this, that's really what it is. It's kind of, it's tying knots to make sure the boat doesn't float off into the ocean and doesn't crush the dock. You have a system for doing this. The other thing we're doing is we're developing strong technology partnerships with companies that need us. I don't want to go into that too deeply, but you can imagine who needs computer vision, right? Who out there is doing analytics on visual data that needs better analytics? So we go and find those opportunities. And in some way, those those marketing systems work together. I'll talk about that a little bit later, but where's my, how do I do this? Okay, there we go. This is more about me, my past. So I had agencies and firms, and I was a journalist. I did a crazy book called Cafe Haiku that got a lot of press. And oddly, the marketing of the book got me into marketing for startups even more deeply. It got me some recognition because I got crazy press everywhere for that. And I worked on big brands like Hilton and Wells Fargo, Sun Microsystem. If you're curious, piece in, I think, 93 or something for Wired called This Is Your Brain on Tetris that got me to move from New York to San Francisco. And that piece still gets play. It's funny after all these years. Here's the two case studies I'm going to talk about. One is a consumer app called Catalog Spree. Really early in the beginning of the iPad, about 10 years ago, we launched that. And I'm going to talk about a little robot called Kubi for telepresence. And so one sort of a hardware device that's more B2B, and one is a consumer app. And it's interesting, the crossover between the two. You know, all of these, this is a great thing to screen grab, right? If you feel like it, but all of these marketing systems work together, right? I talked about working with the analysts, working with technology partners. Well, the analysts can help you identify the technology partners, right? And one marketing mechanism can lead to another. There's sort of a Venn diagram between all of these things. I'm not going to get into it too much, but it's just an interesting way to look at this. And you can make your own Venn diagrams around this stuff, but it's good practice. So a few things are going to work well, right? You're going to try everything and you're going to say, offering people free t-shirts, it works. Or offering free white papers, or offering something. That's going to, offering a free demo, offering a free trial, offering 30 days free, something is going to work to get people into your funnels, and then you're going to start closing deals, or you're going to get, active monthly users, or you're going to get purchases on Amazon, or whatever it is that you're trying to sell, the transaction you're trying to accomplish. So the first thing you want to do is test your freaking message. This is not from one of my case studies. This is a company called Gear 6. They were doing a Memcached distribution, and Memcached, that means putting your data in memory rather than on hard drives, so you can serve things faster over the internet. And I tested all of these different messages to figure out, what do people really want out of this? And I think it was basically people wanted to make this stuff faster. And that's all we needed to say to people. And that would get them into the funnel. Then we'd give them the details. Then we'd close deals. I think they were on like Series F or whatever when the investors pulled the plug. The problem is at the bottom of the funnel, you need good salespeople to close those deals. Anyway, that's enough about test your messages. But I used to do a whole seminar about this for Founder Space and brainstorm messages. You can try a million things and you'll be shocked at what works. Okay, why test things? You get a lower cost per acquisition, right? If 5% of your people convert into leads, or 15% of your people convert into leads, that's a 3x cost savings. So instead of spending $10,000 to acquire 100 customers, you would have to spend $30,000 to acquire 10 customers. So you really want to test your messages to get that cost down so you can serve more messages and have a more efficient spend on your money. So let's talk about Kubi in that context, this little robot we're talking about. So we had ads for specific markets, right? Like which I joined Revolve Robotics that was making making Kubi. I looked through all their sales, and they had three markets. They had medical sales, they had education sales, and they had enterprise sales. I said, well, which is working better? And they're like, we don't know. And I'm like, okay. So we tried the different markets to see what was more efficient. And it still wasn't clear. So we created pages for specific markets, like completely different marketing funnels for them. We even got press for specific markets, right? This is putting Kubi in a school, right? And this is I'm having trouble reading because of this screen. Okay, Revolve Robotics spins your tablet for teleconferences. This is the business market, and I believe this one was the medical market. Yeah, telehealthtechnology.org. So we had press around the different markets: the business market, the telehealth market, and education. And I kept working at it to try to figure it out. Even for B2B, we ate our own dog food and went to conferences. We would buy one conference ticket and we'd all be there on robots. So we'd be talking to everyone and proving that this thing worked, telepresence. And the result of all of that work is you get leads. I've blanked out these people's, ultimately you can't contact them because their phone numbers and emails are blocked, but this is what you end up with, the result of conferences, of email campaigns, of pages on your website, advertising. You end up with these leads, and then you hand them to sales and you say, okay, what do you think? And the salespeople go call them all or email them all and say, okay, it's education, or okay, it's healthcare. And then you focus on that. And then you go back to the analysts and then you say, hey, it's healthcare. And then you go to your partners and find healthcare partners. And that Venn diagram comes into play. You work that system. Here's some of the partners that we got at Revolve Robotics, a Japanese company called iPresence to get that into the Japanese market. We partnered with Video. I don't know if you know them, but they're like a Blue Jeans. We partnered with Zoom, actually, really in the beginning. Zoom integrated us for a while there. I'm not sure whether it's still integrated, but people don't need telepresence robots. I think it's like Zoom is good enough. You seeing me on the screen is fine. I think it was like a nice to have, but not a need to have. Zoom, really, you need. Kubi, not so much. So even fundraising is a funnel. Like you're going to talk to investors now. You're working on your Series A, you're going to do a Series B, and you're going to raise $20 million, and you're going to get some press. That's a marketing opportunity. So now let's talk about Catalog Spree, completely different animal. So digital consumers, like what's going to work? Is it going to be an ad campaign, social, viral sweepstakes, emails? You're going to track all of these things to see what works. So we did these viral campaigns around winning shopping sprees. And when you tell 4 friends, then you can win this, right? You can get a step up. We even got on the Ellen DeGeneres show, right? And she touted us. It cost us money to do that, but we got 3,000 like signups in a minute or something like that. And we did crazy viral campaigns. This was the most viral image we used. Don't tell me you forgot the treats. It got shared like 1,000 times or something like that. And this was the best line ever in all of our advertising. Shopping addict, get your fix. An intern wrote that line. And one of the reasons we knew, besides the click-throughs and the signups from that, we could track the conversion rates. Like Google lets you plant a piece of code, and Facebook does too, in your app so that it'll track when you get downloads from ads. So then you can test your cost per acquisition for every different ad. It's quite amazing, and once we did the Ellen, here's another Venn diagram. Once we did the O, then we used the as seen on Ellen in the ads, and that was quite effective. That we got an uptick in conversions because of that. So this is kind of cool, right? It's a completely different animal from B2B. But it's a two-sided market when you're doing a B2C, oftentimes, because you also have to market to in our case, to the retailers. How do you get retailers to put their brands on your app? The Neiman Marcuses, the Diesels, the Macy's, and so forth. And we actually did a good job of that. We realized really early on, it was the early ones, we had to find the best retailers we could. And I think we got, who's based in Seattle? It's not Neiman Marcus, they're based in Texas. It's not Macy's, it's, I can't remember. Anyway, we got a really good retailer to start, and that helped us get going. But they really, if you're going to do sort of a marketplace, you want to have really good anchor tenants in the beginning, because the other big brands are looking around to see whether their competitors are going to be in there. So you have to work that very hard in the beginning. Get press and convince them it's real. Let's keep going here. Why am I not going to the next slide? There we go. So this is part of the B2B process, right? Really good slide that explained why this worked, right? We have 100,000 apps, 100,000 app downloads, and we have a lot of session time, and we got lots of reviews, and that convinced more retailers to get on board. Here's how easy it is to get on board, right? So you have a whole B2B marketing initiative to provide content to the consumers. So even in a two-sided market, you have different kinds of emails, right? These were the consumer emails where we're making offers to them. For the businesses, you can imagine what those emails look like. It was a text email, "Dear Director of Digital, we'd love to have you aboard." And you have to A/B test, again, even here, to figure out which of your emails is doing better, right? I think this is probably early MailChimp or something like that. It was a split test to figure out which subject line worked better. And the result also of all of this isn't just leads and sales. You also have to present this to your board, right? And these are board meeting slides from 10 years ago that I had to put together to talk to my investors about, here's what we did, here's what we're going to do, right? Here's the results of our email marketing. Here's the result of our viral sweepstakes. The viral sweepstakes was amazing, right? We got 10,000 entries, 70,000 clicks on these viral links, 10% click-through rates on email blasts. It was awesome. And even the social did really well. We got a lot of shares and so forth. And then tell them what's happening in the future, right? In April, we're gonna, if you download Catalog Spree, we'll plant a tree for you. I'll tell you what that's about in a moment, but that was a real curveball idea that got a lot of press. And in May, it's Mother's Day. And in June, it's Father's Day, which no one cares about. Win a wedding, nominate a couple and friends to vote, right? It's like selling this as a kind of wedding registry. There was all kinds of ways of getting Catalog Spree to work and to sell stuff. So wait, did I have that in there? I don't know if I do. I really wanted to show you something. Anyway, the plant trees idea, we got a lot of press for that. We sent trees, saplings to journalists, and we won because exterminate the paper catalog. And we won. We got some, we got some earned press from Mashable as the #1 way to be green on Earth Day. Sign up for Catalog Spree and turn off your catalog deliveries, and help save the world. So we did that by sending 100 saplings for $1 each to 100 green, journalists that were interested in the environment. So that was a very cheap way to get press, and that's a smart thing to do, is to come up with a stunt that really gets a journalist's attention. That'll get you press. So here's an exercise for you to do, right? Contemplate the Venn diagram and all of these different possibilities, and come up with 3 funnels that you think are going to work. 3 offers for that tunnel, for that funnel. 3 targets, each one has a different target. Who do you want to get in that funnel? And 3 ways of getting the word out. For each of these funnels, figure that out. Like, what are those funnels? What are the offers? What are the targets? And how are you going to actually get the message out to people? And do that for yourself. And one of these is going to work better than the others. And once you figure out which one that is, abandon the other 2 and continue and try 2 more, and keep working at it until you start figuring out what's really going to work for you, your business, because each of these businesses has its own DNA and its own way of being in the world. Anyway, thank you. Thank you very much. That's it. If you want to connect with me, there's my email. I'm on LinkedIn. That's my shirt. I don't know what else to tell you. Anyway, good luck and goodbye.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Jeff. So I know we had a request for your contact email. So we had that up on the screen real quick. You can also grab that by completing the feedback form as well. If you have any open questions or any questions you want to ask Jeff right now, feel free to shoot those into the Q&A. Again, you'll find that just at the bottom of your Zoom menu. But thank you so much. We got a couple ask for copies of the slides and everything, so we'll be able to get those for you later.
Somebody said Nordstrom's that's true. That was the anchor retailer. Thanks very much, Lee H. and Mario. Couldn't remember. Anyway, bye. So
don't see, again, if you don't have any questions yet, that's totally fine. Feel free to submit them in Q&A, or you can also shoot them into the feedback form as well. So Jeff, I have a quick question coming in from the audience, if you don't mind coming back on.
I'm still here.
Perfect. All right. So Lucy is asking about using Shark Tank to get your product out, not so much for raising.
Sure. I mean, anything to get the word out, right? Set up your website and get the word out on Shark Tank, and you're going to get traffic. And what you could do is you could A/B test your homepage. You could set up Google Optimize or Fresh Marketing or one of these other marketing testing tools. Optimizely used to be cheap, but now they've gone enterprise. But set something up so you can have 2 or 3 different headlines on your homepage or some kind of landing page to figure out, okay, you're going to get a bunch of traffic from Shark Tank. Take that opportunity to test the hell out of your message and figure out what's going to convert people the best. That's what I would do. Yeah.
People might not know your company, but they definitely know Shark Tank, and that can always kind of pull people in.
Yeah, then you can put as seen on Shark Tank in your ads later.
And that always it adds a little bit more flavor to everything. Perfect.
Sure.
Thank you.
Shark flavor.
It's Shark Week, so we'll take it. Very promising.
I like cooking, but not sharks.
All right. Thank you so much, Jeff. I don't have any other questions coming in now, but again, we'll share a link for the feedback form where everyone can keep submitting them and get you guys connected later.
Yeah. Have a nice day.
Perfect. Thank you, Jeff. So with that, we'll keep moving right along. We actually have our second Jeff of the day. Jeffrey Appelman is the director of CFO Consulting Partners, LLC, and he's our next mentor we have coming on now. So whenever you're ready, Jeff, feel free to come on in. I think we need to make you a panelist, and then you'll be good to go.
All right, I'm ready.
You're good to go.
Yeah, hi, good morning, everybody, or good afternoon, wherever you are. I'm Jeff Appelman, and I'm pleased to be here. And thank you so much for inviting me. I'm really looking forward to learning more about KiwiTech, Q-Tech actually, proper pronunciation, and I'm glad to be speaking to everybody today. A little bit about me on the first, next slide, please. I'm going to talk a little bit today about.
You should be able to just tap or use your arrows to navigate through the slides here. Perfect.
Oh, okay. Let me go back. Thank you. Okay, great. So I've been director with CFO Consulting Partners for the last almost 2 years. And before then, I was CFO for 4 different privately held companies, of which 3 of the 4 were sold. And before then, I was in public practice. I was a CPA working on a bunch of public and privately held companies throughout the years. So I have a wealth of experience and a great background. And today I prepared this slide because I want to talk about lessons I learned over the years in working with not only startups, but entrepreneurs. Just one stepping back for a minute. So a little bit about CFO Consulting Partners. We work with all kind of companies. We generally work with companies in the lower middle market from really 0 to $100 million in sales. And we provide a full suite of CFO services to that market. All right, we're going to have some fun today. So I prepared this presentation. I'm trying to get to the next slide. Oh, there we go. I prepared this presentation to really talk about lessons I've learned from the CEOs I've worked with over the years, and I want to share some of that information with you. Many of the CFOs that I've worked with have made every mistake in the book. And I want to help everybody today so they can learn from those mistakes and not make the same mistakes. So let's talk about some of the most successful startups in my lifetime. And I'm sure I missed out on some, so please excuse me if I've not included anybody in this list. But the most successful startups I've ever seen is the FANG Group, commonly referred to as FANG. They represent Facebook, Amazon, Apple, Netflix, and Google. Now, why did I mention them? I mentioned them because one of them in the group, which is Apple, started by Steve Jobs and Steve Wozniak. Steve Jobs was with the company for a bunch of years, and he was the visionary. He obviously very smart, very bright. And what he did was he hired a CEO. And the CEO eventually threw him out of the company. He threw him out of the company because the CEO at that time, I don't recall his name, but the CEO at that time, he couldn't deal with Steve. He was just too frenetic and too difficult to work with. And he had a lot of issues as far as working nicely and playing nice with others. So he eventually got thrown out, and eventually he came back and he made, he created a wonderful company before he died and turned it over to others. So collectively, these several companies, they represent 12% of the S&P 500. And collectively, they're worth $4.1 trillion. That's a staggering number. And they've all been uber successful. They've all been uber successful, despite some of the controversy surrounding Mark Zuckerberg at Facebook, surrounding Bezos, and surrounding others. But let's talk about not why they succeeded. Let's talk about some of the reasons that I've seen in my career why some have failed. So, next slide. Okay. So I have 10 reasons why startup fails, and I'm going to talk about them individually, and then I'm going to share sprinkle in some stories. And if I have time, I want to talk about the one big story. The biggest reason why startups fail is they're unable to raise additional capital. Many of you have raised Series A, B, C, etc., but the inability to raise additional capital was, I would say, the #1 cause that I've seen. And the reason, thank you, the reason that has occurred is because many times these entrepreneurs fail to provide a product or a service no one wants or needs. Let me give you an example. So about 10 years ago, a friend of mine who I know for 20 years now called me up and said, I have this publicly held company. I'm the CEO, I'm the chairman of the board. And I've been with it for 10 years, approximately 10 years. And I need someone to kind of be the adult in the room. I'm sitting here trying to grow the company. I need help with projections. I need help dealing with the outside accountants. I need you to be my right-hand man. I said, great. So what was his product or service? His product or service was, it was an incarnation. He originally provided and built ATMs, failed to deal with the fact that there were competitors in the marketplace. He thought his was the greatest and best ever. So he had a little bit of tunnel vision, but then he reincarnated the company and he said, well, maybe I could take this ATM platform and make a kiosk for supermarkets, because supermarkets are really slow and really stodgy. They still clip coupons, and they're really slow to embrace. So he went to a bunch of supermarkets. He went to one of the largest redistributors in the country called Cenas Wholesalers, and they were interested at the time in this particular technology. And they did a test pilot, and they allowed us to put some of it into, I think, one of their supermarkets. And it did well. So they were able to put digital coupons, display them on this big terminal. And they came back to us and said, oh, this is great. We've had some good results. We've looked at the data, but we're interested in the metadata. We're interested in what's behind. We're interested in who the people are that are clipping on these coupons. Will you be able to provide us some data? Or will you sell us some data? So my friend, who was a little stubborn, and said, you know, he didn't want to digress from his business plan, which was to roll out hundreds and thousands of these kiosks to supermarkets throughout the country. Now, in the supermarket space, it's like the retail space, they're selling sales per square foot. And no one wanted to have a kiosk that was about 6 feet, you know, about 4 feet wide by 6 feet high approximately, because it wasn't a good return on the investment. And he went along this process. He went through it for about 18 months, and he had very little revenue to show for it. But supermarkets kept coming back to him and said, I want the metadata. Sell me the metadata. And what happened? He ran out of capital. So he raised additional capital. And he raised additional capital from a family office. Now, I'm sure many of you have had this issue, maybe not to this extent. Excuse me. He raised $1 million in the first round. What did it cost him? On both lawyers for both sides, cost him 50%. So he only ended up with $500,000. He then went back to them 6 months later because he ran out of money again, raised another $500,000 from the same family office. It cost another 50% or $250,000. So by the time he was down the road, he had raised $1.5 million and only was able to put into working capital $750,000. Why am I telling you this? I'm telling you because, unfortunately, in his case, he picked the wrong partner, and they used a white shoe law firm that wanted to over-litigate and over-paper this. They had a stack of documents about 4 feet high for a company that had no or immaterial revenue. I think in the entire 3 or 4 years I worked with them, they maybe had $30,000 in revenue. So next, let's go to the next. So the other thing that what I see many times is the failure to delegate. Now, what does that mean? Now, many of you have started the companies. Many of you some of you might have people that you've hired over time. And I've seen many entrepreneurs that have failed to delegate, failed to bring people on board, and failure to trust anybody to do anything as well as they can. And the major failure that I see is many entrepreneurs continue to hold on to the finance function. They tend to want to still be involved in every decision, every bill, every ounce of money that comes in. They want to know what it is, who it went to, and that means they don't have the ability to focus on the marketing, the social media piece that Jeff had talked about earlier, because those are so important. So I can't stress it enough. Please, please delegate, trust other people, and then if we go to the next. You have to invest in the right team. That means you have to hire the right people. You have to vet the right people. Don't get fooled in bringing on family members and investors who say they have the right skills, but very often I've seen, and many of them do not. Many of them are, they just need a place to hang the hat, don't have a lot of skills, don't understand what needs to be done, and make it very difficult for the owner to really be successful. Be realistic on expected outcomes. What does that mean? The example I gave earlier with my friend, he was from Wall Street. He was an investment banker. And he believed in hype. So many of you have gotten where you are because you've been able to hype your product, convince people to invest with you and in the company, and they believe in you. Now, they know from experience, if they're schooled investors, they know that 90% of all startups fail. So they're willing to put risk capital at work. But at the same time, they want to believe in what you're selling. But at the same time, as my friend did, and the mistakes that he made, he kept hyping these kiosks. He kept hyping the amount of ads that he was going to have because he did the math. And he said, well, if I have 1,000 kiosks and I'm able to get 100 ads per machine, he did the math and said, oh, that comes to X number of dollars. And he kept doing this. He kept putting out projections and data to investors, and he never, ever realized any of his expectations, and investors got a little bit fatigued. So what am I saying to you? I'm saying is that not only be realistic on expected outcomes, under promise and over deliver. If you do that, you're going to build a little confidence in what you're doing, and your team is going to be excited, and your investors are going to be excited. So if you have some early wins, that's the name of the game. You know, on Wall Street, they always say under promise and over deliver, because you want to exceed the expectations of what Wall Street is expecting, and the same thing is for private investors. That's why it's important to work with your financial advisors on your projections. That means you don't want to do it on the back of a napkin. You don't want to do it on a piece of paper. You want to hire professionals. Professionals do cost money, but if you work with the right advisors, you will get great projections that are realistic and that people can understand and have confidence in. Listen to your advisors. Listen and solicit advice from them. It's so important. You know, and my next point was about forming a panel of advisors. So I want to talk a little bit about that. So another story I had is I worked with a startup airline. The startup airline was in business for 30 years. So their business plan was, he had this idea. This was a gentleman from former Soviet Union. He came here. He's an engineer. He's a really smart guy. About 30 years ago, he raised a bunch of money, and his idea, his whole business plan, was to go out there and to buy discarded or mothballed airplanes. At the time, 30 years ago, he was going to buy a 727 or a 707, fix them up, get them approved by the FAA, and fly point to point from JFK in New York to St. Petersburg, Russia, and other cities. And he said I could spend, that time when he was doing it, he could spend $10 or $15 million and fix up an airplane, get it declared airworthy, and build a team and go out and do it and get it done. So over 30 years, he raised over $125 million, never flew an airline mile. Now, what was his downfall? His downfall was he failed to realize is that technology changed. He went through tabletop exercises and got FAA approval, but one of his last things that he needed to do for the FAA to get his approval was to be able to pass an evacuation test. An evacuation test means that you go on a 747, you have 10 doors, they open a sample of them, and the slides and the doors have to open. Now, on some of these older planes, some of the things don't work as well, and he failed the test 8 times. But at the same time, he believed so much in his vision for this company that he kept a whole crew of pilots and flight attendants, and he had this big space at JFK Airport because he wanted to show his investors that he really believed in his old message. He believed in the vision. Now, he made a number of errors along the way, and his biggest error is he lived in the dream and he failed to listen to others. He failed to listen to his advisors. He didn't have a panel of advisors, and that really was his big downfall. He eventually died, and then the company was resurrected about a year later with some of the people that worked in the company, and they raised some money to buy a already approved airline that had the FAA certifications. But what they failed to do, they failed on number one. They weren't able to raise additional money to close the deal with this particular other airline that had their FAA approvals. So they raised the money for the deposit, but failed to do that. So that was my little story about that. The last thing that I want to say is you always want to be humble. You want to be a person. You don't want to be a difficult person like some of the early entrepreneurs that we're talking about, such as Steve Jobs, such as Mark Zuckerberg. Although they're uber successful, they are difficult people to work with. So, I mean, that's the way I am. I always try to be humble because I'm not any bit greater than anybody else. And if you're humble, you're easier to work with. You make it a more pleasant environment. Now, how much time do we have left, by the way, Emma?
I just hit 17 minutes for you.
Oh, okay, so I'm out of time then. Let me just have one concluding remark, is that first I want to thank the presenters. I also want to make one other comment, is that, you know, I really wish that everybody that's listening today does succeed, that is successful, and I hope that everybody learns from some of the mistakes these CEOs had. They made almost every mistake in my list there, and they made others. But I would say the one thing that they all had in common is they had this blind spot, and they didn't listen to others and didn't solicit advice from others. They just had tunnel vision about the direction that they were going. And in the case of my friend, he had a lost decade because he made no money, really no money in those 10 years. So I want to thank everybody. I look forward to any questions.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Jeff. I'm not sure if we have time for questions live on the event now, but I will capture them and get them over to you. That is one of my favorite lessons, though. You know, it's really hard to replicate success, but it's definitely easier to not replicate failure. You know, you can avoid those mistakes much easier if you know what they are. So thank you so much, Mel. I see your question. I'm going to keep that captured and get that over just a little bit later. Thank you so much, Jeff. It's always a pleasure having you on, but we do kind of keep moving right along here. So next up, we actually have one of our own here from KiwiTech. We have Sarah Bhardwaj, who's our enterprise architect and one of my favorite people to work at here with KiwiTech. So feel free, whenever you're ready, we'll be able to bring you on up.
Hi, everyone. I'm Sarah Bhardwaj, and I work as an enterprise architect at KiwiTech. And one of the best things about my job is that I get to talk to a lot of entrepreneurs like yourself. And you know, I also get to work on some great ideas. And in the process, I have actually realized that most misunderstood technologies. So my goal today is to help you understand what is blockchain, why is it so popular, and most importantly, help you understand if it is the right tool for you. So let's first start with debunking some of the myths around blockchain. A lot of people think that blockchain is Bitcoin, but Bitcoin is what we call a cryptocurrency, and it is only one of the many use cases of blockchain. And blockchain is not just for financial service industry. In fact, later we'll have a look at some of the other applications of blockchain. And of course, there are more than one blockchains. For example, some of the popular ones are, or you may have heard of Bitcoin, Ethereum, Hyperledger, Stellar, and so on. And the other very interesting misconception is that it's great for criminals, but cryptocurrencies are really not that great for criminals, as all the transactions are pretty much publicly available and they are very much traceable. And I'm sure that that is something criminals wouldn't want to indulge in. So I'm sure that now you know that blockchain has been around for so many years now, but the question is that how did it all start and how do we get where we are today? So it actually all started back in 2009 when Satoshi Nakamoto released a paper on cryptocurrency called Bitcoin. And it actually talked about how this new currency is decentralized and it utilizes cryptography and how it can be trusted, and that there is no central authority which would just print currencies when they see fit. So we will be looking into why is that in a bit. But before that, let's look at some of the timelines. Okay, as you can see, the idea of blockchain has been around since 1990s, but like I mentioned, it was only in 2009 when Satoshi Nakamoto published his paper when it became very popular. And since then, it has evolved and found many uses, ranging from domains requiring reliable and cheap transactions, contracts, and to even distributed apps where data is not really stored on any central server. And it was, I think, around 2014 when one of the notable improvements was the introduction of smart contracts, which is basically a piece of code which is executed based on certain conditions being fulfilled. And this also means that assets can be traded or transferred without the need for mutual intervention, or sorry, the manual intervention. And this also means that transactions become a lot cheaper, and they are quick and less prone to errors. And for certain businesses, that could certainly provide the competitive edge they're looking for. I guess let's now look at what blockchain is and how it really works. Uh, so blockchain actually in its simplest form is a file which is stored on a hard drive, and in which we can pretty much store any information we like. It could also be compared to a database where each block is kind of a row, but it is slightly different in several ways, which we'll look into. And so this file, which is stored on your hard drive, this is basically a chain of blocks which are made up of digital pieces of information. And for every such block, a cryptographic hash is generated. And this hash is like a fingerprint, which is unique for a given piece of data. So if I were to change anything within that block, it would actually change the fingerprint, and it would change the hash. And so every block's hash, it is included as a previous hash or as a piece of data in the next block, which means that if any of the block within a chain is changed, then all the hashes will become invalid. All the subsequent hashes will become invalid, and the blockchain will actually lose its integrity. And this is where the blockchain gets its immutability from. And now, once we have this blockchain, once we have these pieces of information stored, this blockchain can be stored on multiple computers on a network. And usually we refer to these computers as peers. And this is typically a part of a blockchain. Oops. Sorry. Now you may be wondering that that's all good, but how does a block get added to the chain if this resides on multiple peers? So assuming every block represents a transaction, uh, how do we make sure that every peer on the network agrees to it? Well, whenever a transaction is requested to be added on a blockchain, it gets added to what we call a transaction pool. And depending on blockchain's software implementation, which is usually a node or a miner in this case, then it tries to create a hash which fulfills certain conditions. And for example, this condition could be, in case of Bitcoin, they need to have certain number of zeros in front of the hash. And that's the condition, and the miners have to work for that. And once these conditions are met, this hash is broadcasted over to the network, where all the peers can see it, and they can provide their approval. And this process is usually what we call consensus. And whenever a majority of network approves this transaction, it is then added to the blockchain, and then we say that the transaction is complete. And however, one thing to note here is that there are quite a few algorithms or systems for different consensus mechanisms, and every blockchain software does differently. Some everyone has its own pros and cons, and typically this is one of those things which we want to look at while we are evaluating different frameworks for our specific business solution. And also, blockchain usually runs on a public network, which means that anyone can join the network as a peer, as long as they meet certain requirements or certain criteria. But recently, we have also seen a lot of use cases for running permissioned blockchain networks, which are basically private blockchain networks. So next, let's look at some of the different types of blockchains. and private blockchain networks. One of the biggest reasons for trust is the fact that there is no central entity or server which controls it, and that means that even if one were to take control over the blockchain network, he would have to manipulate blockchains stored on more than 50% of the peers on the network, which means that for a public network, which may have, say, a 1 million nodes, that would mean you have to hack or take control of more than 500,000 computers, which could be rather inconvenient. But if you're running a private blockchain network with fewer peers, it would relatively be easier to take control. So that is one of the downsides of using a private blockchain. Having said that, it would still be useful in certain scenarios where you only need certain parties to have access to it. It could be like a closed loop business consortium, and you could still benefits or you could still sort of leverage the benefits of blockchain. And we are seeing more and more use cases in this direction. Um, so in the next slide, let's look at some of the use cases for both types of blockchain networks. And obviously, it's up to you to determine what your business solution is more suited towards. So here you can see some of the popular use cases of blockchain. For example, it could reduce transaction costs for payment processing and money transfers. So there would be negligible fee, and they would be much quicker than conventional methods. And another would be the supply chain management, where there are several parties and vendors which are involved, and an error could prove to be very costly. And also the reliability of blockchain, especially when combined with IoT devices these days, it could prove quite useful to track different stages of supply chain. It also finds users in real estate title transfers, and generally in onboarding and customer screening and whatnot. Where you could do this almost instantaneously and almost in an automated fashion. And also the immutability will be useful in applications like data backup and sharing, where historical records will automatically be preserved. And another interesting use case of blockchain could be for medical research. So for example, if we have let's say all the anonymized medical records which are stored on in a single blockchain, in a world, and we are collecting all the data for, say, cancer patients throughout the world. Obviously it's anonymous, but I think the amount of data which will be available for us to process, or to apply some AI on, it could result in some interesting results and treatments and maybe even cure, who knows. But yeah, I mean, it's kind of, it has that power, and I think this is very interesting use case we are seeing now. Also, I'm not sure if you've heard, but electronic voting machines have been in news a lot, especially in India, where people sometimes question the reliability and security of them. And so, if we were to have, say, all the votes or all the voting is done and it is stored on blockchain, it would be transparent in a sense to every citizen, who could look at them, and there would be no real need for counting, and people would inherently trust the process if they understand how it really works. And that would be one of the interesting ways to see it in action actually someday. And yeah, and the list actually goes on, and I'm sure that there are many more industry disrupting ideas out there which are still waiting to be implemented. So this list could go on and on. And so now next we'll look at some of the benefits of using a blockchain. Uh, so obviously there are, it reduces the costs in transaction, especially if there are some legal or regulatory issues, and it basically automates, and it also has features like smart contracts, which has even made it even better and even more automated in a way. And it also reduces the systemic risk, and primarily due to the decentralized nature of it. Uh, and there are other benefits. for example, immutable transactions and improved security, which is achieved by using cryptography, those hashes which are generated for each block. And it also minimizes fraud due to the improved security and eliminating the need for human intervention. And since the information is publicly available, it leads to effective monitoring and auditing by participants and other stakeholders. So those were some of the benefits of blockchain. But again, like any other technology, it's not without its challenges. So even though we've come a long way, blockchain frameworks are still evolving, and it can be challenging to customize them beyond a certain point. But the good news is that progress is being made every day, and we are seeing improvements, and a lot more features are now being added in the blockchain software. Uh, Next, it is still not used by masses, primarily due to maybe the legal issues and probably lack of understanding this technology and the myths around it. And for example, in India, actually, buying or selling cryptocurrencies was illegal until recently. So those kind of issues are also there. Uh, and we do have several popular blockchain networks now, but the other problem is that they are not really compatible with each other. So if they are just like the internet, if we have different blockchain networks and providing different kind of information or storing different information, it is very hard for us to make them interact with each other. And though this will be resolved probably when the technology goes move forward and we see more progress on it, but for now it could be a potential challenge. But we are also seeing some hybrid blockchain networks, which are a combination of public and private. So I guess people are always trying different things. And there have also been some incidents, when blockchain networks were compromised. Even though the technology is inherently secure, it is still prone to failure due to human errors in terms of security holes and bugs in the blockchain software. So, you must have heard or seen some news where there were some breaches in the blockchain network. So like everything else, there are times when we should probably not use blockchain, or it may not be a good idea. So for example, if your business model does not need or benefit from decentralization, you may, you maybe just, you have a simple web store, and in that case, you would probably not benefit from storing your information on a decentralized blockchain, and you would probably need a normal database. Or if you have any data which you want to have full control over, and also you have some of your users data which you want to protect, especially with the GDPR. So you definitely don't want to store that on a public blockchain, because everyone will pretty much have access to that. And lastly, there have been some use cases where you only really need a immutable ledger, and you don't need the distributed technology or the consensus mechanisms. And in such cases, blockchain may be an overkill, and you may want to look into something called immutable databases, like Amazon's QLDB. And that concludes my presentation for today. I hope it was useful and you learned something. And I'd like to thank everyone for listening to me today. And I will now like to take any questions you may have.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Saurabh. So I do have a couple questions coming in here. Just coming in from Ravi, I recognize the challenges that you mentioned with blockchain. In your professional opinion, what are the largest, one or three that are slowing adoption or innovation?
I think so far, I would say it's mostly the lack of understanding. People do not really understand it well enough to really think out of the box to apply it to some interesting use cases. And a lot of time I hear people, and they have this great idea and they have this business, and they say that my secret sauce is blockchain, and if I use blockchain, I will inherently make it secure. But that when we dig further into it, it doesn't really it may not be the case. So that is one of the challenges. The other challenge would be that even for the development aspect of it, everyone seems to be coming up with their own customized solutions. And even though I would say Hyperledger framework is doing a good job in making solutions for different applications of blockchain, I still feel that there are too many frameworks there, and very few of them are relatively mature, and it takes a lot of work for us to really understand which framework is best for our use case, keeping the simplicity and flexibility in balance. So I would say those are the two things I feel right now, which are challenging from either a business perspective or, from a technological perspective.
Okay. We've talked a lot about kind of the problems or a lot of the issues that have faced blockchain. I have a question coming in here on examples of successful uses of blockchain.
So, the question is, what are some of the successful use cases of blockchain? That's it. Mm-hmm. Okay. So obviously Bitcoin is one, and we are seeing a lot of, there have been some known applications where in the music or entertainment industry, it is being used to transfer royalties, transparently, so that every artist gets their fair share. Microsoft is actually working on one of the products where they are making a storage solution based on blockchain. So it could be something like a version control system. I wouldn't say that is successful as of today, but I think that's something definitely Microsoft is putting a lot into it. So that is going to be one of the successful things. And there are some niche use cases, like I mentioned in the supply chain management, where we have some processes set up where blockchain are being used to track information from different sources, or there are multiple parties involved. And definitely payments, a lot of payment systems, apart from Bitcoin, are using blockchain technology. And in fact, for one of our clients, we are also leveraging a public blockchain to do, implement a wallet-like application. And that is also doing well. So yeah, there is no success story as big as Bitcoin. But there are a lot of good use cases, and there are a lot of problems which are solved these days by blockchain.
Perfect. Okay, thank you, Saurabh. I have a couple questions that have come in throughout the event that are more specific cases. I highly suggest throwing these in the feedback form. We'll be able to get those connected a little bit after. But again, thank you so much, Saurabh. It's been fantastic speaking with you.
Sure. Thank you. Bye.
Perfect. All right, we just got that link for the feedback form sent in the chat, so feel free to click in on there and fill out that feedback form. Again, if you have a question specific to your own company or something like that, it's much better to get those questions answered one-on-one. We can truly spend more than a minute talking about those pieces. But with that, last but not least, I have Peter Formanek, the CEO of Young America Capital, as our final presenter of the day. Peter, are you ready to close us out?
I am.
Perfect. And with the topic that's definitely applicable to just about everyone who I think is attending today, we got Series A fundraising to close out the event.
All right, let me put my stopwatch on here. So I am Peter Formanek. I am the CEO of Young America Capital. We are an 11-year-old broker-dealer and investment bank headquartered in Westchester County, New York, with people across the US as well as in Europe, Middle East, and the Caribbean. And we have 67 people. We are one of the highest volume capital raising firms in the US. We've closed 37 deals in the past 24 months. Let me just see if I can, this is your document.
I might want you to click instead of that, or maybe use your arrows.
Oh, there we go. There we go. I got it. Okay, so I'm going to talk today about Series A fundraising. So, a lot of you are early stage startups. You could be raising a seed round or raising a Series A round. You could even be later stages, still applicable. So we do typically $1.5 to $10 million equity or debt raises. I'm going to zip through this pretty quickly so everybody can understand the flow, and then if you have questions, we'll address that in the after the fact. Sources of capital. Everybody needs capital. Your easiest low-hanging fruit is to get it from friends and family, and they are often going to do the least amount of due diligence. Its biggest trust factor. and most of the time they have the least value add. So they can help you get up and running, but they may not be able to help you be successful. The most prevalent theme that is crucial for an early stage capital raising process is to articulate that you and your company are a must-have, not a nice-to-have. And that is crucial because people look at thousands of deals, they're looking for that 1% that are a must-have. If you can't delineate clearly why your product or service is a must-have, then you're going to be viewed as a nice-to-have, and then you'll be theoretically marginalized by your competition over time, and you will not get as much capital as you need to be successful. Just sticking on that theme, if you get more sophisticated investors, they're going to do more due diligence, they're going to have looked at more deals, and they are going to be more particular about whether or not they invest in your company. You can get money from high net worths and ultra high net worths. They are also easier than bigger institutional investors, but they are fickle, and the outcome of the process is oftentimes unreliable. We've had people who were all set to go to closing, and then the billionaire, the $100 million guy goes on a month-long vacation, and he just doesn't respect the process, and it causes a lot of business disruption. Family offices, everybody can get excited about the opportunity, but then when it's elevated up to the level of the patriarch or the matriarch that makes the final decisions, if they're not interested or they're on vacation, you're not going to be able to rely upon them as a source of capital. You get halfway down the list into venture funds. Everybody knows venture funds. They're egotistical, they're expensive, and they have very onerous terms at times. If they really love your deal and or they think it's a competitive process and they're going to lose out, they will meet reasonable terms, but you got to get an auction process in order to get them to participate on terms that the company finds reasonable. But they do give you a seal of approval that will help you to raise future funds, get more customers, and add more value to your company. Same thing with corporate venture funds and corporate development executives. They are high value add, but they may oftentimes have a right of first refusal. They might help you to generate sales. They might limit your sales because if you're in bed with one of the dominant players in the industry, the other players in the industry may not give you the opportunity to sell into their supply chain and or their customer base. Then we get into less dilutive capital sources, junior capital funds, growth equity, structured equity, or debt funds. These will maybe have either straight debt or debt with warrants or penny options, many different types of structures that are involved, but they don't add as much value because they're more of a passive investor. Venture debt is similar. The other thing I want to really point out is if you take in debt on your company and that becomes the dominant part of your capital structure, then when other people are looking to put in equity, they are going to stop and look at that debt and realize, hey, I'm going to be subordinated to that debt. It's going to reduce my probability of success if the company doesn't track according to plan. And so it could stunt your growth from the standpoint of raising future equity capital. So that's that page. This is a timeline on how the process typically runs. We try to run a very fast process that's got tight metrics. We use this chart as a guide. So basically, week one, we're preparing documents, getting the NDA ready. We do use no-name portals to get maximum distribution. We have 67 registered reps, so whenever we sign up a new client, we evangelize to our 67 reps why this client is a must-have and why it's they need to show this to the investors they're close to, and that helps the distribution process. The more people you reach out to in a professional manner, the higher probability you're going to raise capital, in my opinion. So the rest of this, you can get a copy of this after the fact. It's a pretty straightforward process if you've been through it. It does take around 18 weeks. You can't make it. Some guys ask me, can you raise me money in 4 weeks or 6 weeks? It's just not going to happen unless you want to give away your company. So that is a timeline. We use about $120,000 of annual software subscriptions to run our processes. And this would be one of the reasons why you would want to use a professional capital raiser to augment or run your process. These software subscriptions, other than Crunchbase Pro, which I highly recommend, are very expensive. You know, we spend $26,000 a year on PitchBook for about 10 seats. These other software products, Capital IQ, CB Insights, Crunchbase Pro, and PitchBook are all contact databases and information sources relating to investors and what they invest in and how much capital they have and what they've invested in the past. And that's always very helpful. Traction is an up-and-coming vendor that does the same thing. ZoomInfo is just contact information. So this ZoomInfo could be good not only for capital raising, but also for generating sales, new business development and sales opportunities for your sales pipeline if you have if you're at the point where you're generating revenue. So I encourage you to use these tools or use a firm that has access to these tools. And again, the more volume of closings that the firm has, the higher probability they're going to raise money for you, in my opinion. Just want to talk briefly about what are the desired attributes of your future partners. You're going to be closely tied to these investors or lenders for the next 2 to 10 years. So you want to pick them wisely. You want to make sure they have a great network. And so you should do a lot of your own due diligence. A lot of times people are fielding due diligence and not doing their own due diligence on the investor. Does the investor really have a dedicated pool of capital? Do they have good references? Sometimes we've talked to investors and then introduced them to our client. And then as we're going through the process, we check out some references on the investor and he's very hard to deal with and he doesn't have the money, he says. You got to be very careful to protect your stakeholders and yourself to make sure that the investor is well qualified to participate and is got a network that's going to help you accelerate your sales and your equity and debt growth, has good connectivity, and what tools do they have to bring to the party if they're going to be your partner. We want them to have sales and marketing tools. They want them to give us access to their customers if they're strategic. And so we want to make sure that these attributes are well lined up to add value if you're going to let them become your equity or debt partner. When you're running the process, you want to make sure, as I said, it's very tightly run, and you can hire a professional capital raiser. It can be an internal person or an external person. It's got to be somebody who has demonstrated success and a Rolodex and or a firm. If you run a broader process, you get an exposure to more sources of capital. And you can, if it's a bigger firm, it can be a faster and more organized process. It could be a one-man firm that runs a fast and well-organized process. You just want to do your homework and make sure that you have confidence they're going to get the job done. Relevant industry expertise is very important. Typical terms for our firm, and this is probably very industry standard, it does cost money to hire an external capital raiser, 7% cash plus 7% at the market warrants, and some type of small monthly work fee or equity in lieu of cash work fee. Crucial contract negotiating points. Is this contract going to be exclusive or non-exclusive? That's very important because once you go into exclusivity with the service provider, if IBM and Microsoft call you up the next day, your obligation is to let the investment banker participate and handle those discussions, and then they will be paid on that. So I'm not advocating that you negotiate non-exclusivity because there's merits to both, but you certainly don't want to use multiple investment bankers unless they're all in a coordinated process. You could have them all be non-exclusive, but if we sign a non-exclusive contract, we don't work as hard and we don't reach out to as many people because the downside risk for us is more significant. Is there a work fee or not? We are one of the firms that will work without a work fee if we love the company, but we typically want to get some type of cash or equity work fee. So that is a factor in the negotiating of the contract. Reduced or zero fees for company-sourced investors. That is a very reasonable part of a contract. If somebody wants to get paid on your uncle investing, that's not fair, in my opinion. So you want to have some type of mechanism. The concept should be, there should be no unjust enrichment in either direction when you're entering into this type of contract. So you want to make sure that there is equitable payment, either reduced or zero, for people that the company brings in. On the other side of the coin, you don't want to unmotivate your investment banking partner or your capital raising partner. So you got to have it clearly laid out so everybody, there's no buyer's remorse. Be clear on how the process is going to be run and the timeline. We run a very fast process, and we oftentimes will reach out to a large number of investors. Sometimes the client just wants us to do a rifle shot agreement, an engagement, and only reach out to 10 to 20 investors, see whether or not we're going to be successful on that. We respect that. We don't think that's always the best, but in certain instances it can be. So the rifle shot outreach is the lowest fees and the lowest probability of success. A comprehensive and coordinated process is typically what you want to run. Just be aware of some caveats. The early stage VCs are very selective about which deals they want to look at. And I would say about a third of them will not talk to investment bankers. So you might know which VCs don't talk to investment bankers. You would want to put those on the zero work fee part of the contract and carve them out, because why agree to pay an investment banker when the VC won't even talk to the investment banker? That is not 100% of the VCs. It's only about 25 to 30%, but it's good to know that. And an honest investment banker would agree with this statement and would accommodate you when you're trying to negotiate that part of the contract. Trying to do it yourself, you probably have a lack of access to proper research tools and a lack of warm, receptive contacts, which diminishes your probability of success. I'm not advocating that you hire our firm in particular. There's plenty of great firms out there that do what we do. Get one that you're comfortable with, and your board of directors or advisors believes it's got a good track record and a good reputation. But I would propose that you're better off having professional advisors than trying to do it yourself. It also depends if you're a future unicorn or not. You know, it really, everybody has their own viewpoint on how great their company is going to be. Next point is use an SEC and FINRA registered broker dealer. If you do not, and you raise money and then you want to go public, lawyers will tell you that taints the process for going public. So, and also gives the investors the right of rescission, which is they can get their money back if they don't like what you're doing, and you won't have the money because you'll have spent it. So to conclude on that, run a well-managed process, adhere to a timeline. Herding cats is no fun, and it doesn't end well. Picking the right investors. You want to pick investors that are going to help you to build your company versus investors that are just looking for an economic return, especially in the Series A. You need a lot of help. You want to have people who are willing to roll up their sleeves and help on sales, on operations, on HR, on future capital raises, and other business building opportunities. KiwiTech is a great example. They do phenomenal software development for their portfolio companies. That is building the company. There's no better way to build your company than having a partner that builds your software. Do not ignore international investors. They can give you a broad reach, both on sales and marketing, on future capital raises, and other processes that you need to execute on, and rather than just expanding in the U.S. So that's my point there. You know, in this COVID-19 era, you want to try to highlight, hopefully, that you're in a high-performing industry. These are some of the examples of that. And you want to, if you're not in any of these industries, you might want to make a pivot, or at least show how you're a service provider to those industries. Otherwise, you're swimming upstream. There are a lot of government programs you can look at. You know, that's another option for you. You have to evolve to the new normal. And so what has been good in the past is no longer 100% accurate. You need to have plenty of capital. You have to have a longer runway. You need to accomplish more with less dollars. And you need to get used to Zoom pitching, because you're not going to be able to meet these people in person. You're not going to be able to go to events. The investors have a shorter return on investment time horizon, and you have to factor that into your projections and into your exit plan. Less aggressive financial projections are something that people are expecting as a result of COVID. And then this one here, a bridge round to a Series A is always an opportunity to keep the runway, the capital runway, stable. So don't try to rush through and raise a big round. If you can get a bridge round, which would be a convertible note or a safe note, to bridge you to a larger Series A, this is a great time to seriously consider that. And that is my presentation. We are thrilled to help you. If you want to get some free advice, I'm happy to take your email or take questions right now on this call. And I don't know, Emma, are there any questions?
I do. I have actually, the people are begging for your thoughts on equity crowdfunding here.
So I'll tell you a good example. There's a Florida venture fund. It's the state of Florida's venture fund. And their model is to raise half the money through state-sponsored capital that they are provided, and then they help their portfolio companies with equity crowdfunding to raise the other half the money. So the equity crowdfunding is definitely a very solid option, alternative, and roadmap. I have not spent a lot of time doing it because we already have this large entrenched network. But I'm a big believer. We're backers of a life sciences venture fund called MedStarter, and and they do crowdfunding very successfully. So I believe if you do it properly with the right service providers, it's a great way to pursue raising capital, and it can be in addition to all of what I've just described. It doesn't have to be in lieu of a normal capital raising process. So I highly recommend it.
Perfect. Okay, real quick, just before we break, Gabriel's asked to show your slide with the COVID-related industries to be considered. And we go back just a few here.
Yep, that's this one here.
I have a couple more specific ones that I might ask you guys to shoot over in the feedback form. Again, that link is in the chat here. So these are more specific on your experiences here. All right, we got that link coming back out. But thank you so much, guys. Again, some of the more specific questions, I'll let you guys get connected specifically with Peter to answer. I think that'll be more, it'll be better answered in more than just a minute of time. But I thank you so much, Peter. It's been great talking with you.
It's my pleasure.
Perfect. So just up here, I have a couple of our upcoming events down here. If you're looking for more info on any of these, feel free to reach out that email down below. A bunch of our demo days where we have some of our portfolio companies pitch, along with some different fairs and other sort of events that we think might be interesting coming up. But I'm so thankful to have been able to moderate the event today. Thank you to all of our mentor presenters for this workshop, again, focusing on Series A and beyond. Before we close out, again, feedback form. If there's anything we didn't answer, if there's any additional questions you have or anyone you want to get in contact with, fill out that feedback form. The link is in the chat just below. And I hope to see you at some future events. Hopefully I'll be at them as well. And thank you so much for joining us. Stay safe, stay healthy, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you. Bye-bye.